Welcome to the deep dive. For you listening today, we have an incredible mission. We are exploring this really fascinating collection of translated lectures and transcripts from, prominent Islamic scholars.
Yeah, specifically looking at the insights of figures like Azari, um, Numan Ali Khan, and Abu Razak.
Right. And our goal here is to unpack a really universal human frustration. Like, why do our deepest, most desperate requests sometimes just seem to go completely unanswered?
Which is something everyone deals with, regardless of background.
Exactly. So we are diving into the complex mechanics, the psychology, and the theology of dua, which translates to supplication or prayer.
And this isn't just about religious rituals. I mean, it's a profound look into human resilience. It
Yeah.
touches on the concept of destiny and really how we cope with suffering when the universe just seems completely silent.
Okay, let's unpack this because after reading through these sources, I realize we are so conditioned to treat the universe like a giant cosmic vending machine.
Yeah, that is a brilliant way to visualize the friction we are looking at today. You drop your coin in which represents your effort, your good deed, or your prayer.
Right, you do the right thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you press the button for the exact outcome you want. And you just expect that specific snack to drop right into the tray within, like, 3 seconds.
And when it doesn't drop, we shake the machine. I mean, we get frustrated, we assume it's completely broken, or we think whoever stocked it is just out to get us.
We take it so personally.
We do. We rarely stop to think that maybe the machine knows we are allergic to what we just pressed. So we really have to start by entirely dismantling that vending machine fallacy. The sources we're looking at make a massive theological claim right out of the gate.
Which is that no prayer is ever truly ignored.
Yeah, not a single one.
Right. The text outlined that there are 3 very specific ways a prayer is answered, according to this theology. It's never just, thrown into a void. Outcome 1 is the straightforward response we all crave, an immediate yes.
Snack drops.
Exactly. You ask, you receive, you move on. But outcome 2 introduces that friction you mentioned. It's essentially yes, but later, when it's actually better for you.
Which requires patience.
It does. It relies on a divine wisdom that the person praying simply doesn't possess in the moment.
Right. And then there is outcome 3, which I found totally mind-bending. The answer is essentially saved for later, but not later in this life. The sources state these prayers are saved for the day of judgment.
And the imagery the scholars use to describe this day of judgment is intensely visceral. I mean, it's presented not as a peaceful transition, but as a day of absolute cosmic chaos.
Right, the texts are pretty terrifying.
Very. They describe a day so terrifying, so unbearably hot with the sun lower down, that people's brains will literally boil like rice water.
Wow, like rice water, that paints a picture.
It really does. And the panic is portrayed as so absolute that a mother won't recognize her daughter and a father won't know his son. Everyone's just entirely consumed by their own terror.
But then, in that exact moment of unimaginable panic, the theology argues that the prayers you thought were ignored in your earthly life, the ones you cried over and got zero response to, are suddenly presented to you.
They become literal lifesavers. They shield you when you need it most.
Yeah.
The underlying logic here is a theological balancing of the cosmic scales, really. The tragedy of an unanswered prayer on earth is converted into your greatest asset in eternity.
So it's not a loss at all.
Not according to the sources. They suggest that on that day, people will see the immense reward for their unanswered prayers and will actually wish that not a single prayer they made on earth had ever been answered.
That is wild. Which brings up a really modern, relatable analogy from the text about how these prayers actually travel. Think about a pending text message.
Oh yeah, this is a great comparison.
Right. Like if you send a text on your phone, but you don't have mobile data or credit, it just sits there pending.
Yeah.
It hasn't reached the recipient. According to the scholars, a prayer sent up without sending blessings, what they call darud upon the prophet, is like that pending text message.
It's just suspended.
Yeah, suspended between heaven and earth. It needs that specific spiritual network connection, that acknowledgement of a messenger, to push the message through to the divine.
It acts as a mechanical metaphor for spiritual protocol.
Exactly. But I have to play devil's advocate here for anyone listening who is going through a genuinely brutal time right now.
Sure.
Isn't this whole idea of getting your ultimate reward in the afterlife just, well, a convenient psychological coping mechanism? Like a way to pacify ourselves when the real world is incredibly unfair and things just don't go our way?
That is the natural skeptical response, and it makes total sense to ask that.
Yeah.
The Skangers address this by arguing that this mindset isn't about passive resignation. It's about fundamentally shifting the ultimate goal.
Shifting it how?
Well, if a person believes this earthly life is temporary and the afterlife is eternal, then demanding immediate temporary gratification is actually a poor long-term investment.
Oh, I see.
By viewing an unanswered prayer as a deposit into an eternal savings account, the theology attempts to shift human psychology from despair to a sense of ultimate security. It prevents the psychological collapse of feeling abandoned by the universe.
So, if we are shifting the metric of success to some eternal timeline, how does that square with destiny? Because the sources make a point that destiny, or tortir, was written 50,000 years before the universe was even created.
Right, the master blueprint.
Yeah. So if the master blueprint is completely fixed, why are we praying? I mean, if the ink is dry, what is the point of the conversation?
What's fascinating here is the absolute nuance in how these scholars explain the mechanics of destiny. It's not depicted as a single rigid timeline.
It's not.
No, the theology states that while the overarching destiny is fixed, there are certain interactive elements within it that are uniquely designed to be altered by the act of prayer itself. Think of it like a conditional statement in a computer program.
Like, if the user inputs a prayer, then unlock variable B.
Precisely. And the text gives a stunning real-world example of this mechanism in action. There's a case discussed of a terminal cancer patient in Bangladesh.
Right, I remember reading this.
Yeah, the top medical professionals looked at the scans, did the math, and gave him 3 months to live. It was a medical certainty based on physical laws.
But the text notes he ended up living for 10 years.
10 years. And the scholars point to this as the power of prayer, physically altering what seemed to be a fixed earthly trajectory. The prayer was the necessary input that unlocked a different variable in the divine code.
That makes sense structurally, but then you look at the timelines of when these variables actually get unlocked, and the variation is staggering.
The contrast is really intense.
It is. The sources contrast two major prophets to show how wild divine timing can be. First, there's Moses' mother. She is forced to put her infant son into a basket and throw him into a river to save him from being slaughtered.
I mean, imagine the absolute visceral terror of that prayer as she lets go of the basket.
The ultimate vulnerability a human being can face. Yet her timeline is incredibly short. Within a matter of hours, the basket is found by the queen, and Moses' mother is actually hired to nurse her own baby. The prayer is answered almost instantaneously.
Right away.
But contrast that with the prophet Jacob, or Yaqub. He loses his beloved son Yusuf, or Joseph, and he doesn't get him back in a few hours.
No, the text emphasizes the sheer duration and physical toll of his grief. Jacob cried for his lost son for so many years that his eyes turned white. He went physically blind from the grief of an apparently unanswered prayer.
So Jacob is going blind, crying. What is happening in the background while he thinks his prayer is being ignored?
Well, the story of Yusuf is presented by the scholars as the ultimate case study in the butterfly effect of unanswered prayers. Yusuf is a young, innocent kid who gets thrown into a dark well by his own jealous brothers.
And if you are in that well, you are praying for immediate rescue. You just want a rope and a path back to your father.
Exactly. But the answer to that prayer isn't a ladder. He is pulled out only to be sold into slavery in Egypt. Then he's falsely accused of a crime and thrown into a dungeon.
So for years, every single prayer for immediate release just seems to hit a brick wall.
Right. And the scholars draw out the domino effect here to explain the hidden mechanics of divine timing. If Yusuf isn't kidnapped by his brothers, he's never in the well. If he's not in the well, he's never sold to Egypt.
It's a chain reaction.
Yeah, if he's not in Egypt, he's never falsely imprisoned. And if he is not sitting in that specific jail cell at that exact historical moment, he never meets the prisoners whose dreams he interprets.
Which builds his reputation as a master dream interpreter. So when the king of Egypt has a terrifying dream, years later, about 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine, Yusuf is pulled from the dungeon to solve it.
And because of that, he is put in charge of the entire economy. He was in that jail, so he is the one who stockpiles the grain. And when the famine hits, he ends up saving the entire region.
Millions of people.
Millions of men, women, and children are saved from starving to death, including his own family.
The delay in answering Jacob's prayer positioned Yusuf to save an entire civilization. Our perspective as humans is just so incredibly narrow compared to that timeline.
We see the individual pixel, while the divine timing sees the entire mural. And the sources bring this into the modern day with a profound anecdote about a man named Robert Davila.
Oh, this story was so moving.
It really is. He is completely paralyzed from the neck down, only able to move his face. You can only imagine the sheer volume of prayers he must have made early on for physical healing, to just move his hands or walk again.
But the physical healing never came.
No, the universe remained silent on that specific request. However, his profound patience and the way he maintained his faith despite his physical state became an incredibly powerful story.
People heard about his grace.
Exactly. The psychology of someone finding spiritual flight while trapped in a paralyzed body inspired countless individuals to find their own faith.
It's what the sources call a sadaka jaya, an ongoing, continuous charity. By not receiving the physical healing he asked for, his personal suffering essentially became a vehicle for the spiritual liberation of thousands of others.
It forces a massive paradigm shift. I mean, what if the thing you are begging the universe to remove from your life is actually the exact instrument being used to elevate you or someone else?
That brings up something I really wanted to explore. We can look back at history and see the big picture payoff of suffering, but what happens when a human being simply hits their breaking point in real time?
The texts dive deep into this with the ultimate trial of Miriam, or Mary.
The setup for her story is brilliant. It starts before she's even born. Her mother is pregnant and desperately expects a boy, dedicating the unborn child to the service at the temple. But she gives birth to a girl.
And the scholars make a very pointed pause here. They emphasize that the text highlights daughters as a profound blessing.
Right, they really stress that.
Yeah, being disappointed by having a girl instead of a boy is framed as an ancient, ignorant mindset that the theology actively attempts to eradicate.
So Miriam grows up with miraculous levels of devotion. The text mentions that her guardian would enter her room in the dead of winter and find her with fresh, out-of-season summer fruits.
She is the absolute definition of a favored, righteous person in this theology.
Yet she is handed what can only be described as the ultimate social catastrophe for that era of virgin pregnancy in a deeply conservative society.
It's unimaginable pressure.
Yeah, she knows exactly what her community will say. She knows the accusations, the loss of honor, and the absolute scandal. There is no biological way to prove her innocence.
And as she goes into labor entirely alone, isolated and terrified of the public humiliation waiting for her, she hits a wall of despair. The Arabic phrase she uses in the text, which the scholar Numan Ali Khan breaks down linguistically, is incredibly heavy. She says, Nasiyan Mansia.
And that isn't just a passing, I wish this was over.
Not at all. It is a two-layered wish for complete annihilation.
Complete annihilation, wow.
Yet the linguistic breakdown shows that Nasiyan means she wants to physically disappear in that exact moment. She doesn't want anyone to knock on her door. She wants to be invisible.
And the second part?
Mansia goes much deeper. It means she wishes to be entirely erased from historical memory. She wishes she had never existed at all so that no one in the future could even speak her name in connection with this scandal.
It is arguably the darkest, heaviest panic attack recorded in these texts. It proves that even the most devout figures experience profound, crippling despair.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the divine twist here is breathtaking. She was absolutely terrified of patriarchal humiliation. She was terrified of what the men in her society would call her. But look at how the theology says God responded to her breaking point.
By flipping the naming conventions of the entire Arab world.
Exactly. In that society, and many others historically, a person is identified by their father, son of so-and-so. But in the Quran, Jesus is explicitly and repeatedly referred to as Isa, son of Maryam, Jesus, son of Mary.
That is so powerful.
The theology posits that God took the exact thing she thought would destroy her honor and used it to immortalize her honor forever. Bypassing the male lineage entirely, every time her son is mentioned, her name is elevated.
So what does this all mean for us? We've talked about the mechanics, the timelines, the butterfly effects, the absolute breaking points. If prayer is this cosmically powerful, can I just sit on my couch right now, ask the universe for $1 million, or pray for this deep dive to go viral and just wait for the delivery?
Well, this is where the scholars bring us crashing back down to earth with a highly practical formula. It's called dua plus dawa, prayer plus action, or prayer plus medicine.
The texts are very clear that prayer is not a magic wand that excuses you from effort. There's this hilarious example provided in the source to illustrate this.
Oh, the guy with the spiritual leader.
Yeah. A man goes to a spiritual leader begging him to pray that he has a son. He goes back year after year. 3 years he does this. Finally, the spiritual leader stops him and asks, "Wait a minute, are you even married?" And the guy says no.
He hasn't even taken step one. You cannot ask for the harvest if you refuse to plant the seed.
Exactly.
There's another more serious anecdote about the prophet. He was once bitten by a scorpion. As a prophet, he is considered the most spiritually connected person on earth. He could have just prayed for the pain to stop.
But he didn't just pray.
While he was reciting verses and praying for healing, he also immediately called for hot water and salt to physically treat the wound.
He took action.
He did. The underlying philosophy here is that the theology views the physical laws of the universe, science and medicine, as being just as divine as the spiritual laws. To ignore medicine is to essentially insult the physical tools the universe already provided you with.
Speaking of prerequisites, there is one condition for a prayer to be accepted that the sources describe as completely uncompromising. It's the concept of halal, or permissible income and food.
This is a major roadblock for a lot of prayers, according to the scholars.
Right. The theology states that if a person's body is nourished by corrupt, money-stolen funds, bribery, exploitation, the universe categorically rejects their prayers.
It's a hard line.
It is. The scholar gives an example of a man crying his eyes out, begging for forgiveness at the holiest site, but because his clothes and food were bought with unlawful wealth, his prayer simply cannot be answered.
It acts as a spiritual firewall. You cannot demand purity from the universe while knowingly operating in corruption.
Hold on, I have to push back on that absolute stance. What if someone is trapped in a corrupt system? Like, they work for a massive, shady corporation or live under an exploitative government, and they are just trying to put food on the table for their kids.
That's a fair question.
Are they permanently locked out of divine communication? Because that seems incredibly harsh.
That is a vital distinction, and the scholars in these lectures actually address this by separating systemic entrapment from willful exploitation.
Oh, okay.
The theology is primarily warning against the intentional choice to harm, cheat, or steal from others for personal gain. If you are knowingly exploiting people, you sever your own spiritual connection. It forces an ethical audit of your life, not just your religious practices.
That makes sense. But if your affairs are in order, the sources do offer a bit of a psychological hack for getting your prayers answered. It's the act of praying for others.
Oh, this is a beautiful concept. The text mentioned that when you pray for someone else behind their back, maybe you ask for them to find a job or to be healed. Angels are present.
And what do?
And the angels respond to your prayer by saying, Amin, and the same to you first.
It's an incredible mechanism. If you want something desperately, pray for someone else to get it. It removes the selfishness from the request and actually fast-tracks your own blessing.
It builds a community of empathy rather than a community of isolated individuals treating God like...
What, like a vending machine? We are right back to where we started.
The loop closes perfectly.
It really does. As we wrap up this deep dive, speaking directly to you, the listener, whether you belong to this specific faith tradition, another faith, or no faith at all, the overarching lesson from these scholars is fundamentally about perspective.
Absolutely.
We spend so much energy obsessing over the outcome, over the exact snack dropping from the machine at the exact right time. But the ultimate value of digging into these texts is realizing that the act of asking itself, the vulnerability of standing there empty-handed and admitting you don't have all the answers, is often more valuable than the thing you are asking for.
It's the relationship.
Exactly. The connection, the conversation itself is the actual prize.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on everything we've unpacked today. We assume prayer is a tool we use to change our circumstances.
Right.
But what if prayer is actually a tool the universe uses to change us? If the delays, the silence, and the friction are what build resilience, empathy, and deep character, does that mean the ultimate purpose of human suffering is simply to force a profound conversation with the divine?